This is an existential issue for our plants. It's not business as usual. I think our decision is the wisest for the industry and the wisest for the taxpayers.
You have done for the past 10 years, at least with Bombardier, is pure business partnership.
We borrow it to invest. That's what we do.
We believe that this is the best way to protect thousands of good, well-paying jobs and the safest and most effective way to get our natural resources to world markets.
Pipelines, autos, asbestos, and even banks. Government bailouts of corporations and industries happen at every level of government. Think of the Liberals' $4.5 billion buyout of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion or the 2008-2009 auto company bailouts. They cost Canadians over $3 billion in losses. And still, one auto company that received help announced this week it's closing its GM plant in Oshawa, Ontario, affecting about 2,500 jobs. There are also the recurring loans to aerospace company Bombardier. Should the government be in the business of bailouts? We're going to turn to the Premier's League for some answers. Christy Clark was Premier of BC from 2011 to 2017 and is now Senior Advisor with Bennett Jones. She's in Vancouver. Bob Rae was Premier of Ontario from 1990 to 95. He's also served as former interim leader of the Federal Liberal Party. He's now a senior partner at the law firm OKT. Hi to both of you. Thanks very much for being here.
How are you?
I want to start, I of course want to get into the debate on bailouts, but since today, USMCA, new NAFTA, CUSMCA, whatever I'm supposed to call it, was signed, I want to get your take on how it unfolded. And the signing ceremony this morning, Mr. Rae, I'll start with you because I believe my colleague Katie Simpson described the Canadian presence as a grumpy one. What did you take from the way it played out?
I think the government, and I haven't talked to anybody, so I can give you my unvarnished view. I think they felt very uncomfortable about having to do it in this circumstance with the steel and aluminum tariffs still on. And frankly, with President Trump still spouting all kinds of stuff about tariffs and protectionism. But I don't think they had much choice. I think the fact is the deal had to be signed. It was negotiated, and the deal didn't include an end to the steel tariffs. And I think they had to do it. But I don't think they felt this is a wahoo celebration. I think they felt it was something that was necessary for Canada to do in almost in a defensive way, like playing good defense. We're playing defense against a very aggressive protectionist president of the United States, and I think we got the best deal we could in the circumstances.
Ms. Clark, I see you nodding.
I agree with everything. I agree with everything Bob said, and that's the thing. The timing was terrible. Politically, it's awful. They got we've all said this before. They got the best deal I think that they could out of it. They didn't get softwood done. They didn't get steel done. Those are yet to be decided. And then, of course, this issue with GM in the background. It makes it really difficult politically, but fact is, politics happens in the world of reality, and that's what they were dealing with today.
Okay, so Mr. Rae, Ms. Clark just brought up the GM closures. Obviously, this has brought forward this ongoing, it seems like, debate about whether or not government bailouts are good policy or mostly about politics. What are they?
They're a bit of a combination, but it's more to do, I think, the thing that you've always got to look at. I mean, first of all, let's put my facts on the table. I governed during a recession. We kept very close tabs on what we did. We provided loans and investments for 107 companies, of which 106 were a substantial success and one didn't work. So that's not a bad average when you're dealing with a major recession that we faced in the years between 90 and 95. I look upon this as a really pragmatic question that you want to make sure you're getting a good deal, and you want to make sure that what you're ending up with is actually going to be better overall for the country and for the economy than what you had before. I don't think we had much choice once the Americans had moved in a dramatic way under President Obama with respect to the car industry to do what we did. Our car industry is integrated. If we wanted to maintain a certain level of investment in Canada, we had to do what we did, and we did it in the years after 2008. But sure, there are examples of bad deals, and there are examples of unwise decisions that are made, and you've got to look on it as fundamentally as a business proposition. Is this going to be good in the end? Is it going to be good for the economy?
Do you think that, Ms. Clark, transparency is an issue, and do you think that that's coloring Canadians' perception? I mean, we don't know what strings are attached to a lot of these deals, and then years later you see jobs lost after governments have given these companies money or lent them money.
Well, I mean, I don't really question what the government did, and after the American government came in and did their bailouts. I mean, leaders were trying to keep us out of a global recession. That was what that was about. Very different from what we're seeing today. And so I think further to Bob's point, I would say if we want to determine whether or not something is a good deal, are we investing as taxpayers in a business that has a future? Or are we investing as taxpayers in a business that doesn't have a future? And so, I mean, as much as I was angry at the government for getting to the stage that they had to buy the Kinder Morgan project, when they finally did, at least they're buying an asset in an industry that has a future, which is oil, Canadian oil. I don't think the sedan building industry in North America or in Canada has a future, and I'm not sure that that would be the best way to spend our money. The other thing to remember is everything that this government does is deficit financed. So not only would we be bailing out a business that has no future, but we would be asking our kids to pay for it because it would be bought by incurring more debt on their behalf. Not debt that we're going to have to pay, not jobs that we're going to have to worry about, but ones that they're going to have to worry about. I don't think that's fair.
Mr. Ray, you're nodding as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I say it's fundamentally a business decision, and often politics intercedes. I mean, for years, federal governments gave a lot of money to industries in Sydney, Nova Scotia, the big steel companies. And I think after a long period of doing that, the government realized we're just throwing good money after bad. These companies are not going to be able to compete on the global market. When I was in government years ago, we had to transform the Ontario wine industry. And I know it's a tragedy that all Canadians share that we're no longer, drinking baby duck every Friday night. But however, and Christy knows a lot about this as well because BC was engaged in a parallel process. We lost a huge GATT decision in the 80s, and we had to restructure our wine industries in Ontario and British Columbia. It's been
I know a lot about baby duck.
It's been a huge success story. The recreation of the Canadian wine industry is a huge success story. Did it have an element of a bailout? Yes, it did. We subsidized bringing over people who could provide us with great advice on how to make a better industry work. We worked closely with the grape growers in helping them to completely change what they cultivated. They're no longer producing grape juice grapes. They're now producing wine grapes of a very high quality, and we've created a quality industry. And that took a partnership between business and government and a decision to say, you know what, we're not going to let this whole industry go under, and we're not going to let these regions go under. But we better make sure the product that we're making is actually a product that is going to find a market. And that's the key, and that's and politically, that's what's a really difficult decision, because you're having to say no, and certainly we said no, other governments say no, to say, look, I don't think it's right for us to get involved. For example, Olympia, New York, the Reichmans, the biggest real estate company, one of the biggest companies in the world. They came to us and they came to the federal government. They came to Ontario. They came to the federal government in the middle of the huge downturn in the 90s, and they wanted us to get involved in buying some paper and doing different things, and we said no. We said we're not in the business of doing that. And if we were to bail you out, we'd have to bail out every real estate company, which unfortunately in Ontario there were quite a few,
right,
who were in serious trouble, and we're not going to do that. So you really got to think about the implications, and then you got to figure out what's the best way to do this. How do we help? I could give you lots of other examples where we made decisions, and if we hadn't made them, a whole region would have gone down, and a whole part of the economy would have gone under, and we couldn't afford to do that. But we had to make sure that what we were doing was actually going to be sustainable.
From a federal
Yes.
bird's eye view, though, Ms. Clark, can it sometimes appear to exacerbate regional tensions? And for example, you've got a lot of people in Alberta this week saying, if you know, everybody's worried about the auto sector right away, they're treating it like a national crisis, they wouldn't do the same for us. Or Bombardier, Quebec votes are more important than Alberta ones.
Yes. Well, you know what? Welcome to Canada. It has always been that way. I mean, it is, look, as a British Columbian, I take it as a fact that we are going to get a lot less help and support from the federal government, no matter who's in government, than Quebec and Ontario are. That's just part of the gripe that we live with when we choose to live here. I suppose if we want to change that, we could move to Ontario and Quebec, but we like living here in British Columbia. You look at all the things that, the feds ragged the puck for years on getting LNG going, which is going to create thousands of jobs in British Columbia, at the same time that they were bailing out Bombardier multiple times. They are refusing to buy rail cars and work with Rachel Notley on the pipeline.
To be fair. They haven't refused. They say they're open to discussions, but
they're open to discussion, and they were not there to support the pipeline, either of them, for years before they got to the Hail Mary pass of trying to buy them out. And now we're already within days of this GM announcement talking about federal assistance for GM in Canada. So there's just no question. Western Canada, despite making the bulk of the contribution to Canada and supporting healthcare and supporting education to a greater extent per capita than any other province, we get the short end of the stick in this country. But you know what? I don't think that's a reason. I don't think that should affect the way we make the way we think about the GM plant. I think Bob Ray's sage advice is absolutely right. Is it a good deal? Is it a bad deal? Is it a future industry? Is it an industry of the past? And I think it's a bad deal because it's an industry of the past that will have to be deficit financed to try and just preserve those jobs in the short term.
okay, unfortunately, I'm out of time, but thank you so much
She always,
to both
you know,
of you.
she does this all the time. She talks like the clock.
I hope that you all both
She's
enjoy
such a
it.
pro. She's such a pro.
I
It's
hope you both
unbelievable.
enjoy a glass of baby duck this evening. And
Yeah,
thank you.
Did I keep
I've
you
got a few
awake?
cases in my basement.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Christy Clark
Thank
and
you.
Bob Ray.